I want to share with you my trips in Greece. Just it's not nothing special. I mean, it's a special trip, yes, but there's nothing particular in this story. But it's just for the pleasure of telling you how it was. Not nobody needs to know it, but it's just for the sake. Just listen to this like you're listening a story or something like this. So I did two trips. One in 2001 and a second one about 10 years later. The first one was we had a specific destination. I was with one friend and the friend of that friend. So there were three persons, and we wanted to see the Mount Athos in Greece. Maybe some of you know about this. So Mount Athos is a peninsula in north of Greece, and it's I don't know, it's like a Mecca for Muslims. So what Mecca is for Muslims, it's not exactly the same thing actually. My mistake. It's really an important place for Christian Orthodoxy. So Orthodoxy Christianity means it's just like the Church of Russia, if you want, Eastern Europe, Romania, which is where I'm born. I was born. So this place, it's like a small country inside the country, so the access is restricted, and it has I don't know the number of precisely about 20 monasteries or so. Not that big of distances between them. The place is not that big. It's like a peninsula, long peninsula. I don't know exact the size of it. Perhaps 10 kilometer long or so, plus minus, and it's 2-3 kilometer wide. So maybe it's a little bit more than 10 long. Anyhow, so this place has only males on it, so there is no access for women in there. Has been like this for at least 1,000 years. So, and there are, although majority of monasteries I think are Greek, there are several nationalities. Obviously, it's going to be Romanian, Russian, big one. I think it's the biggest one is Russian actually. Maybe other nationalities which I don't remember. These monasteries are all very old. It has been built several hundred years ago. Perhaps the oldest one it's about 800 years or so. Obviously, they are being renovated and stuff. So it's also a place in the nature. So it's sort of a mountain. It has a peak at 2,000 meter, which is about 6,000 feet. But it is a not all mountainous area, but it's with forest, and the bay obviously is going to be in the middle of the ocean, of the sea actually, Mediterranean Sea. I think I'm not sure if it's Aegean Sea as well in that area. So it's a very beautiful place, and you need permission actually to get in there. There is a name for it. Obviously, if you Google up on Mount Athos, you'll find the details. So you need kind of a permission. There is no fees, or the fees are really minimal, and the stay is limited. When I was there, again, that's we're talking about 25 years ago. The stay was limited to 4 nights. Actually, I didn't know at that time, but you could extend it to 8, so you add 4 more nights once you are in place. I'm not sure if this changed in any way since then. All this to say that so we did travel to Greece. I think I was in Canada back then, so I did travel with these two persons straight to Greece, and then in north of Greece. There is a small city, I think it's Daphne, but I'm not sure. By a it's a bay, and you take basically a small boat, and that brings you to a small bay inside this area. Again, women cannot go there. However, they have there's a small ship, small boat, which kind of makes a tour around this peninsula for women, so they can see it from a distance. The reason for this interdiction is that these are all male monks, Basically, that's a concept in Christian Orthodoxy. Uh, a monk, be it a woman or a man, must be separated from the opposite sex if you want. So there's no temptations and so on. So anyhow, we spent 4 days in this mountain, and by that moment, I was already Christian because I was born more or less Christian, but I didn't believe until I reached perhaps 25 years old. So I was already going to church and so on at that moment. So personally, I did expect to have some sort of a to meet people there, monks, if you want. There were several hundreds, I think, back then, and still now, I think several hundreds there. On each monastery is a couple of them. So I was hoping to meet maybe a spiritual person. I mean, I guess many of them are spiritual, but to have a contact and just see someone like this, basically. That didn't happen for me. I just spent 4 nights, and that's just my first trip. I want to tell you how it was, just for the fun part of it. Fun, I mean, just touristic part of it. So I do remember that we said it's your option. You don't pay. You will sleep at usually in monasteries. So these monasteries are big, many of them, and some are really big. They have a lot of rooms and so on. Because actually this place had a lot of monks, somewhere about 150 years ago or so. So it was a really big place. Today is much smaller in terms of habitants, if you want. But we said to visit maybe 3 or 4 monasteries and sleep, obviously, by night in one of them. Just if you ever go there, my advice is just my personal advice, right? There are people just like tourists today who want to see everything, or at least the most they can. Um, from a Christian point of view, if you're a really spiritual one, religious one, I think that's another good idea. That's just my take on it. I would, if I do, would be to repeat this, I would just pick 1 or 2 places, or maybe even just one. Kind of, it's like the megapixels in cameras. Everybody wants more, but it's not always necessarily an improvement. So I would just try to visit less and move less, and just take the time to enjoy the place, basically, at one place, not running around. um, so that's much just a suggestion. So I was saying that we did visit 3 or 4, my memory is good, places in there, and we had to travel by sort of a small vans. It's not really a bus. Vans that take maybe 20 persons, 25 persons. Now, this happens to be, I think oftentimes tourists go in the summertime. And I think that's not a good idea, because if you look at temperatures, especially since maybe in the past 10 years or so in the Mediterranean area, there are waves of heat coming straight from North Africa desert. So it's just a global change, actually. This is a really recent thing. So if you get hit by, I'm not good with Fahrenheit, 40, 45 degrees weather in full summertime in one of those vans, I'm not sure how it's going to be working for you. But back in the days, it wasn't that hot, and still we took these van trips between monasteries. It's perhaps, I don't remember exactly. The roads were not asphalted back then, so it was shaky, dusty. The van happened not to be anyway air conditioning in there, no water. So we were having small bottles of water. We were really poorly prepared, if you want. I remember I was in basically the back of the van by the back door, so no vents, no nothing in there, and I was cooking like a shrimps or lobster, if you want. I do remember that trip terrible. And also somehow, um, these kind of displacements at that place. So they do. I think there are cars in there at that place. I mean, it's not like maybe they did asphalt some roads by now. I don't know, but it's totally not a place where I would go and just want to have the modern comfort in terms at least of displacements. It's precisely a place where you want to kind of step back in time somehow, if you want, because the buildings themselves, that's how it's supposed to be. I just want to make a small note about this. I also did visit in Greece. There is this kind of tourist place, tourist attractions called Meteora or something like this. It's kind of monasteries which are have been built on top of. Just look on Google Maps, Google Images, on top of like stone peaks. I don't know how to describe those. Really impressive from a tourist point of view. However, those monasteries in the Meteora, which is not in Mount Athos again, it's a different place, but those monasteries in Meteora, because it's so touristic, you just see basically walls in there. So there is absolutely no monastery. I mean, perhaps there are still some couple of monks, but there is no monastic life that I'm aware of. So if you want monastic life, you need to go Mount Athos. And by the way, there are other monasteries in Greece. There are also monasteries for females, for nuns. I recommend, and maybe just inform yourself in advance. It's not just Mount Athos, but Mount Athos is really the most important place in Greece, and perhaps one of the most important places other than Jerusalem in the Christian Orthodoxy world. So back to Mount Athos, again, there are many monks. I mean, in each monastery there are at least a few of them, and there is monastic life. Is it really an elevated, I'm not sure if the word is fine, elevated, very spiritual life? It's, I think it is. Is it the strongest one in the past 200 years? Probably no longer that strong as maybe 100, 200 years ago. It has diminished, if you want, intensity wise. That's just my estimation, my guess. But there are still monks in there. So just don't go there if you're a Christian religious person. Don't go there thinking you are going to get kind of stumble over 100 saints or something like this in terms of spiritual presence, if you want. Monks, by definition, I repeat, this is what they do in Mount Athos. Even if someone has a spiritual life, that person will completely hide it. So it is not going to show you anything or talk to you anything. If it does so, I don't know, but it's completely hidden. So don't kind of my advice here: just don't go there thinking you are going to see, I don't know, you know, see with your eyes high level of spirituality, visible, tangible. So monk life, it's a really kind of a hidden life, right? The spiritual struggle, it's hidden, and it's hiding even between themselves. So one to each other, they hide completely these things, but they do have offices. They do have several hours of offices by the day at the church and so on. And they also work. They are mostly, I think, autonomous financially, but they do receive also donations from abroad, from countries, from Christian countries around, especially Eastern European countries. Um, and also by night, they usually have a program of personal prior, prayers, I think, right, in their cells and so on. So all this to say that we did travel with these vans, pretty punishing experience. And I was going to say that because this place is, let me just get a drop of water here, is other than the tourist part, it's really a spiritual place, right? But for the people who who live there. And by the way, just side note again, there are you may also find there's usually many renovations going on and so on. Not so much constructions, new constructions, but there are also people, just regular citizens, not sure, maybe Greek, but from other countries maybe as well, who just work in there, right? So the monks may do some work, but there are contractors and so on. So you may find also workers basically in the place. But I was saying that being a spiritual place, and a very old one by the same time, again, it started all about 1,000 years ago. My take on this would be just to try to, how to say that, not to use modern facilities such as displacement. I would try to go by foot, but between monasteries is going to be not a ride, but let's say a hike if you want. It's the roads are fine, but are also there are also small. I'm not sure about the term in English. Small paths, if you want, through the forest, through the this, if you try to travel between monasteries other than the main roads, you really need to get a GPS, make sure you have maps in advance, because you can get lost. It's not well indicated in any way, at least it wasn't back then. So, and also be sure to ask for advice from a monastery before or going by walk to another monastery other than the on a main road. Be sure maybe there are maps. I'm not sure, maybe they are better organized now, but back then it wasn't organized and it was very easy to get lost in there. And again, the monasteries are usually a couple of hours walking distance from each other. So hey, just be aware, this is not a city, right? It's a nature place. Just my suggestion about this point. But if I would do it again, I would completely skip any vehicular displacement or so. And ideally, it would be if you can find a monk which is traveling, happens to travel between two monasteries, maybe just go with them, right? You may ask around, say, asking, is there someone moving to that monastery later in the day? Could be just another person or visitor as well, and just maybe try to travel with groups. Yes, this is about just my displacement part. Now for accommodation, again, I remember it was very nice. Obviously, it's not hotels, so but it was usually it's going to be clean and you are going to be received. I believe there is also I think the word in English is curfew, like after some hour the doors of a monastery will close and you can be I don't know which one of the rich people in this planet, they won't open for you. So just ask about these details, so be sure, maybe don't travel if it's late in the afternoon. I don't know the times that they close the doors, but just be aware of this part here, right? Especially if you travel by foot, just so you don't have to spend the night outside the monastery. Is not going to be fun, I guess. Although in summertime is not that bad temperature wise. And a good advice, I think, a good advice would be to just skip altogether the summertime. There are going to be feasts, I think feasts, religious feasts in summertime. Oh, by the way, if you want to go for Easter, be careful because there's a lot of crowds, a lot of people in there. Maybe accommodation is going to be difficult, and it's just not fun where it's too many people, right? So be careful with this, especially if it's summertime and so on. My advice would be just to go maybe spring or fall time, autumn. It's usually much easier to travel, and also the weather is much more friendly, especially for the Greek area in Greece, and you have less crowds. So it's just more fun, you know. If you go in the middle of the summer in Italy at the I don't know Trevi Fountain. I don't know. I'm not sure you're going to see the fountain at all fountain at all. So just saying. Accommodations is fine. Rooms are clean. Usually, monks are very nice. They are receiving the visitors. You can you can visit the monasteries inside the churches, especially the church in the monastery. But sometimes there is more than one church in the bigger monasteries. They have old paintings, and definitely, but again, depends on your expectations. It's a place that I don't know, you feel some. it, it, I'm talking about the buildings area. It's just a spiritual feeling. I think it's present, and you get kind of to travel like back in time, right? Especially if you're looking at the buildings and paintings. So it's beautiful. Don't expect miracles. I mean, don't expect. I don't know. I was going to say Champs Elysees in France, but that was the biggest disappointment for me in Paris. I don't expect to see something extraordinary or something like this. You just go with just go relaxed and just enjoy the day. And it's again, it's just seeing really old things in there. Although again, it's being renovated constantly. Um, some of the monasteries are very aesthetical, at least from the exterior part. Look on Google Images. Some maybe Simono Petra, I think, Saint Peter. That's the Greek name, Simono Petra, I think. Are kind of built on top of rocks and so on. Anyhow, look at the images. You don't have access everywhere inside the monastery for obvious reasons, but you can walk around usually. And also, from what I remember, you will eat with at the same time with the monks. Now, there is a name for that place where they eat. I forget it now. The food wasn't that a lot, and also, funnily enough, monks, you can look for YouTube videos. Monks, at least at the places that I visited, they eat really fast. I mean, the time allowed for food for meal, whoa! Especially if you have been walked for a couple of hours or just kind of pass the time, spend the day, and then you are really all angry, not angry, hungry, and you did. I'll tell you what I did actually. So I was actually, I happened to be at the larger monastery, and was a feast. I don't remember the feast, but there were many monks coming from other monasteries at that place. And I think this bigger monastery is called Kareya or something like this. And by the way, this place Karia, hopefully I'm pronouncing well, is kind of the if you want the not downtown. That's the central part of the mountain. It's a monastery, but it's also other buildings around. It's big, but although I think there are a couple of monks living there, it didn't feel spiritual at all to me. So don't spend time at the main Karia. It's like a small city, tiny city in there. Don't spend too much time. My advice, if you look for spiritual feelings, go to monasteries which are farther away. So I was saying that there was a feast that day, and for once we got a big piece of fish from the Mediterranean Sea, right? So all the fish comes from the sea. The monks do fish it by themselves. So for once we had a good chunk of fish at the table, and obviously I was so happy, and I started savoring. Hopefully, that's how you say it. I just taking bit by bit, small bits by small bits. I just enjoy. I was enjoying the meal, and then all of a sudden, there's some person who just takes my dish from in front of me, and I was like, "Oh, what's going on?" That's the meal time. It's over. Oh, so that was really not very happy about it. I mean, not angry, but disappointed. And actually, I went walking around, and just went to the kitchen area, which was an open area actually. and told to a monk, listen, they took my food. Okay, come here, I'll give you another one. So it worked out for me in the end, but just be careful timing for a time allowed for food, because you are eating with the monks and with other visitors and workers. It's limited. I don't know how much, maybe 15, 20 minutes, maybe ask ahead. So hurry up when you eat. The food was, I, if, I don't really remember what kind of food was, but was good, decent food. um, However, it wasn't that much amount. And also, if there is so there is this periods in the year when they don't eat fish, so there's limited, like it's more vegetarian food. I think it's going to be the same for visitors. So my take on this is, especially if you have a special food condition, like you need to eat specific foods, just bring your food as much as possible. Obviously, you're not going to have a fridge in your room or a fridge anywhere. Just try not to take perishable with you, and just kind of try to pack your backpack and get your own food, just to be sure with this. Also, water, important. I don't remember having seen water around between monasteries, so be sure you have really bottles of water. There is no real stores in there that I remember, maybe in Korea. Just be sure to have big bottles, and you will refill them in the monasteries if you need to walk between the monasteries. Careful with this. Also, wear protection, kind of, especially if you come from a country like Canada, maybe straight in Greece. Be sure the sun is really strong in there, so something to cover your head, and cream and so on. Again, you cannot really, from what I remember, you cannot really buy things other than souvenirs, right? Well, I'm not sure what's the name in English. So yes, this is for food, and I don't remember exactly if you had 3 meals a day. Probably not. Probably only two. And I don't remember if you had breakfast at all, if the monasteries were giving breakfast at all. So again, perhaps 2 meals a day and not a lot of meals. So just careful with this. So yes, this is about the if you're visiting part. I think, especially in smaller monasteries, there are. I'm not sure if the word is correct. Skits. That's a smallish monastery, if you want. You may be expected to participate at the offices, but not necessarily. I mean, you can decline to simply say no, thank you. Obviously, but it's usually the bigger monasteries. It's up to you to participate at the church offices or not, and they have almost. I'm not sure if it's all night long offices every night, but it's certainly several hours long. So if you like this thing, you will be served, and it's a beautiful. Now, my small tip here, just personal taste. You see, I'm I, I, I go to church. I'm not sure if you say that practicant. So I go to church, and just give you my tip, my way actually. When I go to church in the city where I live, I go earlier morning, for instance. At first, they don't have the lights on inside the church. It's still daylight, but they just kind of light some candles, right? And that's my type of atmosphere. That's my type of. That's how I like to see inside the church. The moment they turn on the lights, it's kind of the mood goes away from me. So you may want to look to monasteries that haven't been too much modernized. By modernized, I don't mean a lot. But for sure, many monasteries, especially the big one, have lights inside the churches, electric lighting, right? Lights. So maybe if you go for a smaller monastery, maybe look online, try to find images. Maybe if you want more intimate atmosphere, smaller monasteries may not have invested too much money, and may still be kind of rusty. Not rust, that's not English. More like back in the days, back in time. Also, wanted to say something. Uh, there is there is so usually tourist. I think a majority of tourists will visit monasteries and skits. That's the smaller one. However, there is, I think, at the south extremity of the mountain, there is an area which is more difficult to access. Again, maybe there's vehicles going there, but if you need to go by foot, it's going to be farther away. I said it's long, 10 kilometers long, the whole peninsula. That would be about 6 miles long, but I think it's longer than this. Just look on the Google Maps and measure. So the distances, if you walk by foot, it's fairly long to walk between places. And again, there is a more remote area which is called the desert area or something like this. It's not really a desert, but and that area actually is not with monasteries but with small cells. So basically, small homes where I think there are still several of them, these small homes, which are still having habitants, monks in them. Many have been abandoned, but you may just get your information. And this area here, it's different, a different kind of perhaps a different kind of feeling overall, right? So it's not big monasteries with several monks. It's small places which are kind of spread around at certain distances between them. So it's a different experience altogether, and you actually need a guide, I think, a guide, because it's difficult to find these places, and I don't think there are maps, and it's just you need to kind of know where to go, right? So just sharing this with you, maybe you are interested in these things. So this was my experience. Maybe if I remember, I'll tell you more. But I just want to say something that one of the things that I do remember about this, and this is really personal. I mean, I don't expect to feel the same as I felt. But when this trip was over for fifth day, actually 4 nights. By the way, one of the two guys that I was traveling with, he I, I think he did hide this from us because he found out before we left the peninsula, he found out that he can extend the trip, and he told us, but it was too late for us to extend it as well. So maybe he kind of fooled us, and he didn't told us, he didn't share this information with us. Actually, he did stay for 8 nights. He stayed longer. Perhaps he wanted to stay by himself. Who knows? Anyhow, all this to say that when I left the peninsula with that boat, so this boat, I think, brings you back to a small city on the mainland, which is called, if my memory is good, Daphne. I do remember when I was on this boat, and we were approaching this kind of bay area where the boat was going to arrive, and there were obviously tourists on that just in that bay area, and among those tourists, obviously there were women. So right now we were back in mainland Greece, and I do remember this. I do remember when I stepped out of that boat, of that small, this kind of small boat actually, small ferry, and went back among in the middle of that crowd of tourists. I just didn't want to see women, not because I'm is that misogynist or something like this, not because of that. It's just because inside the mountain, which, again, mountain or peninsula, that's what we call Athos. Inside there were no women, and it was also kind of spiritual place. And I knew I was going to see a woman anyway back in the normal life, if you want. But for a moment, I actually I was looking downwards. I didn't want. I wanted to keep this. It was a kind of a feeling without women around you for several days, and I just wanted to keep this feeling for as long as possible. Obviously, it didn't last more than a few minutes, but I do remember this thing, and that was unexpected for me. I mean, I didn't have this, I didn't had this in mind. Nobody told me about this, and I felt like this. So maybe now that you know, maybe you are going to, I don't know, be aware of it, and who knows, maybe it's going to be fun for you. Nothing against them, obviously, but it just was a. I do remember very clearly that feeling, very interesting, and the first and only time in my life that I had that feeling. So this is the trip in Mount Athos. Let me just jump to 10 years in the future. Yeah, 10 years forward, and Tokyo. Tell you about my second trip. Just a side note, to me, that's really personal taste. Greece, if you want to go in Mount Athos, that's nice. But other than that, I would recommend try to visit a couple of islands in Greece, and maybe Thessaloniki, I think it says in Greek. Uh, to me, the mainland in Greece was not interesting, touristically speaking. It's okay because it's a new society, it's a new world, a new place. That's cool to see for a couple of hours, but it wasn't something interesting. They do have museums in the bigger cities. Maybe it's worth. I did visit the Acropolis. To me, I didn't enjoy it. They do have restaurants, so they do have a night at evening, these large plazas with where they put those tables in the middle of the plaza, in the middle of the street, and you eat. And the food is great in Greece, but just be careful. Make sure you read the reviews ahead, because restaurants, after watching Chef Gordon, you may have to just be aware of real life situations about restaurants which are not well managed. So food is nice in Greece. I mean, depends on your taste, obviously, but I do enjoy the food. However, just mainland area didn't tell me much, with very few exceptions. Just to give you an idea, I do like. I did like they have a pie with sweet cheese, which I'm a big fan of it. And they prepare it in some places. You never know where inside the city it's going to sell actually, but only early morning, and it's warm, so it's really nice. And maybe they have something else. Also, you may be surprised. Depends where you are coming from. If you come from North America or Canada, I was surprised to see almost every Greek male sitting at the table by the sidewalk, enjoying, I think, a glass of water, maybe some tea or something, but putting on the table a pack of keys, which were keys from home and a car and so, and putting that cigarette pack. So many of them were smoking. Anyhow, that's for me a Canadian person, but I've lived in Romania. And Romania is also, unfortunately, and also Europeans, many of them are smoking. But in Canada, this smoking thing has been pretty much diminished. That's a good thing, in my opinion. So yeah, I was just saying that that's just a cultural shock for me. Anyhow, this is for the mainland. What's nice in Greece is traveling with trains in the mainland. So if you have to move across the mainland, there were, at least back then, two types of trains. One more expensive, kind of first class. The second one less expensive. And back then, the more expensive one had climate, was climatized, and that was the best, by far the best choice. So just be aware of this. One nice place in the mainland that I do recommend and remember was the Piraeus port. So this is like a city near Athens, I think, and not far away from Athens. And the Piraeus port is where you take big boats, ferries to go towards the islands. And I also maybe suggest, if you rent some, you just stay overnight in Piraeus or even in Athens, try to get early morning on the streets. That's when the air is more clean, But that's where it's just so nice in that place in Greece to see the early morning hours when there's starts being light outside. It's so nice, so quiet. You have birds and peaceful, and I don't know. It's just a very nice mood. So all this to say that this is the second trip again. I didn't go to Mount Athos in the second trip. I just went to islands in the south of Greece, and the ferries were leaving very early morning. If my memory is good, around 7 a.m. or so. So I had to wake up. Also, I think I had to took a small train between Athens and Piraeus just to arrive in time for the ferries. And by the way, obviously, a ferry will never wait for you, right? So be careful. All this to say that there is something different because I did watch YouTube videos and try to uh, um, kind of see again the same experience I had back in 2012 or so, 2012 or so. When I was there and I took the ferries, first of all, the ferries were just regular boats, most of them. Um, by slower boats, big ships, but slow. Unfortunately, I think, unfortunately, from my own point of view, many of them, from what I've seen in videos on YouTube, many of them have been replaced by what they call speedboats, speed ferries. What's the difference between two is the whole experience completely different. So the bigger ones, the bigger ferries, slower ones that I took back in the days, these were just regular kind of ships, big ships. You would they would get cars in there, but you will sit at the upper bridge, and it's just like a good old ship. You have a bridge, and you can walk on it at the top of the ship usually, and it's a large area that you can just spend your time. Usually, there were also seats on these areas. So this is not inside the cabin. You can also sit inside the cabin for sure. And by the way, back then there was not a lot of food inside the cabin, so don't expect to have a breakfast necessarily. Maybe it has changed, but just be sure about it. Just be aware of this. Anyhow, so you could spend during the trip on the ship or ferry, spend your whole several hours, depends how far you go, for which island you go. It can be between maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and up to 12 hours trip, right? With several stops, the 12-hour one. And also, it could be daytime or nighttime. I'll tell you about this in a moment. So you could stay on that area, exposed area outside the cabin, a large area, and just enjoy the view, enjoy the sun, enjoy the smell, enjoy the Mediterranean Sea. Um, I used to read books about the Mediterranean Sea when I was a child. This sea has something to it. I'm not saying it's a different color. It's not orange or whatever. It's just something about it, and it is different at different hours, especially in the morning hours. At sunset, it's different to see the Mediterranean Sea. Is just something special, at least for me. And I'm not talking really about the color of the water. I think the color of the water is kind of dark blue, unless you are near the bay area, when if the water is more shallow, then you could tell that the water is in French is turquoise. It's kind of pale green. It's beautiful, but I'm not talking about the color. It's just about the surface of the sea, in the horizon line, the line in the distance, the land in the distance is so beautiful. And I mean, beautiful. It depends, right? It depends what you like. And the whole experience with those ships, it was so nice. Uh, like I said, I think unfortunately these days most of those ferries are fast ferries, speed ferries, what they call them. These are still big ferries, but you don't or almost don't have an exterior space to stay. So you are sitting in a cabin which kind of has sits like a plane or something like this. It's not cramped, but zero experience whatsoever. You do have windows, but it's absolutely nothing compared to being on the open area of a big ship that goes slowly. Completely different. So you it's up to you. Maybe you give you that this tip. If you still can find slow ferries, I mean, maybe there's going to be smaller one, older one, maybe cheaper ones. Look, ask around, look for the ticket price. Maybe if you I don't know, if if I did kind of make you curious about what I told you, maybe go with a smaller one, slower ship, and just enjoy what I did enjoy back in the days. Now, how about the yes? Okay, I'll tell you in a moment. How about the islands themselves? Obviously, there are going to be more touristical islands. I think Mykonos is the most touristical one. And then there is this one that I never remember the name for whatever reason. This island, which has been a volcano which exploded, and it's kind of it's really has heights to it. It's really, some areas are really tall, and you have like a big wall of rock going into the sea, really tall, like I guess hundreds of feet tall. Um, you just Google up, please, the name. For some reason, this name doesn't stick in my brain. I never had, and never did actually. So first, let me talk about Mykonos. I did stay in Mykonos. Summertime, finding a place to sleep, it's going to be difficult. You need to really book in advance. However, on top of this, prices are going really high. I cannot tell you a price, especially obviously I've been there 15 years ago, so everything is changing in time. So anyhow, rooms are really going. You are going to pay premium prices for rooms in the peak of the season, especially in places like Mykonos. In my opinion, again, everybody will differ, right? Mykonos to me, it's a tourist trap, and not just because of the prices. I didn't find something special about that island. Obviously is going to be a lot of tourists, and the bigger islands, I told you about ferries. So I'm a ferry would be for me a big ship that takes cars, because that's how they kind of move between the mainland and the islands. The Greek people do take ferries with their cars, right? So these ferries leave from Piraeus, and these are tourists but also locals. However, you will have cruise ships, obviously. Yes, to me, cruise ships, I mean, depends. If you are on a cruise ship yourself, then it's going to be your adventure, right? But if you are tourist already at that place, let's say you are renting a room in the island, and you see two big cruise ships arriving at the same time, more or less, or inside a couple of hours interval, you don't like that, because I can tell you, Greek islands oftentimes have those small kind of villages with white houses, and when those tourists get from the cruise ships get stuck on those streets, yeah, there's no way to pass, at least not against the flow. With the flow, maybe you will. So all this to say that when you see those cruise ships, at least when I was there, I was just staying at my place, or moving at a different area of the city. So anyhow, to me, Mykonos, yes, there are restaurants. Maybe some are good. I don't know, by the sea, but they have this kind of windmills, which is obviously, it's just I don't get the attraction. In pictures, they do look good, but in real life, I don't know. Let's see what's so special with them. So we totally skip Mykonos. However, the other island, the one with the volcano, that's definitely one of the things that it's just standing out, at least within Europe. I didn't really visit North America. I mean, the Great Canyon will see spectacular views as well, other places as well. I'm pretty sure inside the United States. In Canada, we do have mountains, but again, that island, X name, you name it, you go up with the volcano. It's spectacular, it's special. You are not going to go to the moon either, right? So don't just keep your expectations in check so you don't be disappointed. But there are views, and there are especially the views around, especially in the higher area of this island. It's special. Um, yeah, I was going to say that you also have a plane towards this volcano island. So there is a plane going directly, I think, from Athens to there. It's not that expensive, wasn't that expensive, and was much more convenient. But I do recommend, if you can take a ferry, a slow ferry instead. Maybe you go one way with the ferry and back with the plane. You can book online. It's not too difficult. It worked well. And there are a couple of websites that sell tickets online. Just be careful which you are using. But I was saying that this island was worth seeing. Maybe one day, maybe even stay overnight. There is a very tourist place which is right by that really deep, I don't know what's the name in English, but deep kind of rocky wall or so goes deep into the sea. That's one of the cities that's on that island, and that place is very tourist, very expensive, but also beautiful. If you can have a dinner or a supper with your family, with your with whatever you're traveling with. And have that view and just enjoy the moment. It's special. It's not something. It's something you will not find someplace else. As just like the mood wise, not necessarily the view. The view is beautiful, but just the Greek Greek islands, I would say more. It's mostly about the feeling. Not necessarily always about the view. The view is beautiful, but it's really the in French we say ambiance. I don't know what's in English for. Yes, this was my experience. I think I did visit a couple of other islands. There are also islands that are close to to Piraeus or Athens, which are like a couple of 30 minutes away by ferry or so. These are very touristic. So there is two or three of them very close again to the mainland. I don't recommend this unless you are really in a rush because there are a lot of tourists and there's not much to see. You need to go farther away for islands, several hours. Also, at some point, I was in an island which was farther away. There are also other islands which many tourists don't go there because they are too far away, but maybe they are worth visiting. But mainly, I think many islands do kind of look alike between them. Not all of them. Maybe in further away regions, it's a different feeling, but just kind of depends what kind of tourist you are, right? If you want to explore more, just try to pick two or three locations, or maybe just one farther away, and just go there and see how it goes. Also, can just step away, even inside a touristic island. You can step away from the tourist places. You can go to the more local places, local areas where the locals are eating out or so, um, and you can just enjoy not being. You're still a tourist, but not being really living side by side with the locals, and the food is just as great and less expensive too. But also, you just get the vibe of the place, the way they live in there. And be aware that Greek people in the islands are not rich. Oftentimes, they don't have a lot of income, so try not to display too much money if you happen to have, and just be kind of try to um, I don't know what's the name in English, just kind of be just like one of them. And also, I can tell you, on one smaller island, one day I moved away from the tourist places that just was just walking through there. They're small homes, white homes with kind of the streets are tiny in between these buildings, tiny buildings, and sometimes depends on the island. The streets are white, and it's really beautiful. And all of a sudden, I got myself in some sort of a small plaza, really small, and there was a school in there, and the kids were playing around, and that was like I did jump basically from just like from the tourist planet to the local planet. in matter of minutes. I was really special feelings. You could see the real, actual local life of the regular persons that live there. So I'm finishing this video saying that on from one of from this second trip from one of the islands which was farther away, I actually took a ferry by night, and that was a very nice idea. Actually, I think it did left by the evening time, and I don't this oh this is a good point. This old ferry, because it was a night trip, they gave me kind of a bed inside the cabin. I kind of had to climb down some stairs to see the cabin. I looked at the cabin 3 seconds, was terrible. I just didn't want to stay there. So I went on the bridge. This bridge was at the back of the ferry. It was really large, right? Just big ships. And all around the bridge area, bridge is like a surface. Hopefully, I'm getting the right name for it. There were kind of seats and bench, and so we have this kind of I don't know the limit of the bridge. There are plenty of people sitting in there, and basically, I don't know if most, but at least many tourists basically they did sleep on those benches at night. We were dozens of people right there, tourists of all ages, just sitting on these benches. We got just maybe some covers, but it was really warm. So I could we were sleeping together. Again, it was a pretty large area, and you could tell the people were chatting, and then the chatting was going dimmer and dimmer until they were falling asleep one by one. It was really nice experience. But the nicest part of this, it was just that night trip, because the ship was stopping at several islands. So we had several stops, and these ferries will always, when they go into a bay, or not sure all those terminology. So it's like a bay, is like a concrete platform, right? And they have to reverse to just let the car uh, move in and out from the ship. So, and that concrete platform on the island, it's always illuminated. The water is also illuminated, and the colors and this whole maneuvering, like the whole movement of the ship going with the reverse and the stopping and all the cars going off by night. It was very, very nice to watch. Again, it did so several places, several islands, and I guess by the end of the night I did fall asleep finally. But it was such a nice experience, completely different what you may experience in other places. So this was my experience in Greece, and again, try to enjoy it. The food, if it's your kind, it's nice. I personally do like it. You can find Greek restaurants in many cities in North America and Europe as well, so you get an idea what the food is. And it's just about, it's I find it relaxing overall. It's a different pace. It's definitely, and I repeat, definitely not New York City in there. It's a different place. The air smells because of the sea, because the sea smells. The Mediterranean Sea has that smell, like salty smell, fresh smell. The air is nice. The light is nice. Even the light, the sun is nice. The sunset are very nice to see. So it's a place that has its, I don't know how to describe it. It's not like in those pictures, like commercial pictures or so, or these advertising things. It's just it is, it's something different. I mean, you need to experience it, I guess. Just don't bring expectations, too high expectations, and it's just a different feeling in there, and that's what I actually like the most. And by the way, the islands don't have many trees from what I remember. Greek islands are pretty dry, like bushes. So again, it's very hot, especially with this climate changes, very hot. So be really prepared with water and protection from sun. All right, hopefully you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching.